Hi, I'm Amie Valpone. I recently healed myself from 10 years of chronic illness, and today I'm here to share my story of how I healed with you. About 13 years ago, I was working in corporate America, and all of a sudden I was getting about 40 pounds of water swelling in my legs every day, which is called edema, and I'd wake up in the morning and be like 100 pounds, and by the end of the day I'd be like 140 pounds. And doctors didn't know what was going on. They said, drink less water, cut down on your sodium, all these crazy things. And they took my blood work and said, they called me the next morning at my corporate office. I was eating lunch, and my doctor said, you need to get up right now and go down to this office. And I said, I'm fine, I'm eating lunch, I'll go to the doctor next week, just give me his number. And he's like, no, you need to get up right now and go down there. It's really important. And I was like, this is crazy. Okay, so I left my lunch on my desk thinking I'd be right back. And I go down to Chelsea in New York, downtown New York, and I look at the address and I look up and it says St. Vincent's Cancer Center. And I was like, what? And so I called on my cell phone the doctor, and I was like, you sent me to the wrong place. This is a cancer hospital. And he said, oh no, you need to go in there. This is where you need to go. We think you have leukemia. And I was like, oh my God. And honestly, from that point on, my life has never been the same. Obviously, I did not have leukemia, thank God, but they bent me over literally within like 10 minutes and gave me a bone marrow biopsy, which is like a corkscrew to your tailbone, and quite possibly one of the most traumatic things that you can go through. And so the biopsy was negative, so I spent the next 2 years every 2 weeks in and out of St. Vincent's Cancer Center getting 30 vials of blood taken. All these foods that I was eating, I was starting to become allergic to: gluten, dairy, soy, corn. My body was super inflamed. It was swelling up when I was eating different foods. Not like an anaphylactic shock, but more just like you couldn't even touch my body after I'd eat like a non-GMO organic rice cake, and like the only ingredient is like organic brown rice. I mean, it was insane. And so St. Vincent's Cancer Center was then like, we think you're anorexic, we think you're bulimic, all that, the stuff that you hear from everyone going through health issues. And so after 2 years, they didn't know what to do with me anymore. They had sent me to pretty much every hematologist, rheumatologist, and vascular surgeon here in New York City, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and I had exhausted all of them. And so no one knew what was wrong. My white blood cells were a mess, my platelets, my hemoglobin, my blood work looked like I should have been dead. My white blood cells were like 0.6, which is pretty much someone dead on the ground, because normal is 4.0. And I was like this, because I'm so high energy, but now I realize it was like cortisol and like fight or flight mode, which I didn't even realize I was in until very recently. And so I then was sent out to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, went out there with my mother and my aunt. They took me out there for a week and did a whole workup of blood work, another bone marrow biopsy. Then they came to me on Friday and said, Miss Valpone, here's your blood work and all your paperwork. We can no longer work with you. Your insurance isn't covering you anymore. There's nothing wrong with you. And so I went back to my, corporate job and was like, wow, I guess I just have to deal with this leg swelling. But along the lines, things were also just starting to shut down. I just wasn't feeling that great anymore. And I ended up having to go on steroids because I had something called myositis in my leg muscles. And so the steroids actually affected me really terribly, and I was so tiny. And so from that point on, I spent so much time at the hospital for special surgery. And I don't know if it was that I was going in and out of hospitals, or that I was also going to so many doctor's offices and on tons of antibiotics because I had small intestinal bacteria overgrowth and candida and all these crazy things going on, that I contacted C.diff colitis, which is deadly. And so my mother took me down to Philadelphia to a hospital down there, and they literally gave me 24 hours to live with C. diff. And so I was laying there, everyone had to be in gowns, and no one, because I was so contagious, and I was laying there with morphine in my arm. And I remember saying to myself, like, if I survive, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to helping people realize that they're not crazy and get to the root cause of what's going on. And so that's what I did. I never went back to my corporate job. I was on disability at the time. And I launched my website, thehealthyapple.com, and went back to school to get my degree in integrative nutrition, understand integrative medicine, and dove into working with, functional integrative medicine doctors. So going beyond regular Western medicine and healing with, or I should say, fixing the symptoms with a drug, instead really healing the body and getting to the root cause of what's going on. And so I read hundreds of books and worked with a handful of integrative functional medicine doctors, and they found everything from mold to heavy metals to hypothyroidism to leaky gut to candida to polycystic ovarian syndrome to Lyme disease. I mean, handfuls of these things that Western medicine were like, nothing's wrong, go, here's steroids, go back and, go back to your corporate job, you'll be fine. And so that was a huge wake-up call for me. I remember sitting there with the Lyme disease paperwork and just crying because I was like, how many people are so sick walking around on drugs and pharmaceutical drugs, and they have no idea anything is even going on because these doctors are telling them there's nothing wrong with them.